Hey guys, welcome to video number 6. Now that we understand data types, we need to understand that there's going to be time when we have to change from one data type to another. We may have someone enter a number into an interface, like a command line interface for one of our programs if we ask them to give us a number, but then we need to convert that number from a string to an integer, say. So there are going to be times when that's going to happen. And so what we need to do right now is we need to look at how to convert simple data types from one type to another using a cast function. So, all right, here on the desktop, let's go ahead and open up the command line. And let's go ahead and get into Python. All right, so now as we have learned in the past, x equals 3 is a string. That's a string of text, just like Mary Had a Little Lamb. Because it is surrounded by quotation marks like that, we know that it's a string, it's not a number. If we tried to add that to another integer, it would fail. We would get a compile time error because we can't do that. You can't add a string to a number. You have to add numbers to numbers. You have to concatenate strings to strings. But what we can do is say x is equal to, and we're going to go int, because we want it to be an integer, and we put our string in there. And now, if we get the type, we're going to find it to be an integer. So we converted that string into integer. If we check, then I probably should have done this first. If we say x, once again, is equal to a string of the number 3, and we print the type there, it's a string. So if we convert that, we're going to say, how are we going to do that? Let's say, and we're going to do type. And then we're going to convert it. Now this is going to be a little complicated here. Should print out an integer because we're converting x from a string to an integer. We're getting the type of it, which is integer, and then we're going to print that. So let's see if it works. And sure enough, the type is integer. It started out as a string, and then we converted it. So we're using the cast function. In this case, the data type is in parentheses. Now let's go ahead and go back the other way, and let's say x is equal to, and we're going to make it a integer this time. So now it's an integer, it's a number. We can tell that by print type x. It's an integer. So now we're going to convert that to a string. We're going to say y. Let's just use x again. We can keep using the same variable, it doesn't matter. String x. And now, if we print the type, did I miss something? Oh yeah, I missed a parenthesis, my bad. Let's try that again. Print type x. There we go, now it's a class string. What I did, if you'll look, I put an asterisk. I hit asterisk instead of the shift 9, I hit shift 8, and that's why that didn't work. That was my error. But notice how Python gives us this nice little error message. It tells us that I unmatched parentheses. So I have this parenthesis here, but I didn't put one here to match it. So that's why it gave us that error. But when we did it right, in fact, it worked. So what we've done is we have start that word again. We have converted this integer from an integer to a string. Now let's look at some that don't work quite as easily as that. We're going to say x is equal to 3.5. What type of data is 3.5? Well, it's a float. And we can verify that. And now we know x is a float. That's any number that has decimal points after it. So x is a float. Now we're going to convert x to an integer. So let's go ahead and convert x to an integer. Let's say int x. Now, what type of thing is x? Well, of course, we know it's a float, print type x. But watch what happens if we do print x, if we print the value of x. Watch what it does. Ah, it only gives us the 3. Where did the 0.5 go? Well, unfortunately, when we convert directly from a float to an integer, the only thing that Python knows to do is to just truncate, to just get rid of the decimals. So it doesn't matter how many decimals are out there. Let's say x is equal to 3.2255. Okay, that's obviously a float, right? So we say print type x, it's float. Now if we convert that, x is equal to, and we say int x, and then we print the type of, spell it right, it's an integer, but when we printed the value, gets it back to 3. You got rid of all those decimals. As you can imagine, this can play havoc with your program if you, depending on some kind of mathematical operations, and you convert numbers back and forth to integers or to floats like this. As you can imagine, it can cause you some serious problems. So now that we have x as an integer, let's convert it back to a float and see if it remembers all those decimals in there. So let's go ahead and say x is equal to, oops, x. And now we're going to print x. 3.0, it did not remember. So basically, it doesn't remember the decimals regardless of whether you convert back and forth or not. It just gets rid of that information. So it's important to know if you're doing this kind of math and you're converting things back and forth, what you're going to find is it will embarrass you on occasion. It will cause you problems. That was interesting. Okay, well, I was looking for a page in the internet. I didn't find it. All right, but you get the idea. You can convert from strings to floats. You can convert from floats to complexes. You can do all kinds of things, but there's some things you can't convert. Let's see if we say x is equal to true now. What is x? What type is it? Well, let's see. X is in fact a Boolean. That's true-false data. What's going to happen if I try to convert x to, say, an integer? Do you think it'll convert? Let's see. Now, if I print the type, sure enough, it's an integer. And if I print the value of 1, why would it do that? Why would it convert that to a 1? Well, remember in the previous video I told you that a Boolean can equate to the value of 1 or 0, true or false. So yes, you can convert it to a 1, or pardon me, you can convert it to an integer. See what happens if I try to do the same thing with a string. So I'm going to say x is equal to true. Once again, I'm going to print the type out just to verify it's a Boolean. Now I'm going to say x is equal to, and I'm going to say string x. And now let's see what happens if I print the type. It should say string. And if I print the value, it says true. So it converted the word. It actually converts that to the word true. So you can, in fact, you can convert from true to, or pardon me, from booleans to integers and strings and floats and things like that. So you can change those. You can change those data types. This only works with the primitive data types, with the simple ones like integer and strings and floats and things like that. It doesn't necessarily work with like a dictionary or a frozen set or some of the more complicated data types. It doesn't work with those, but it will in fact work with the simpler data types. Let's see if we can convert an integer to a complex number. So we're going to say x is equal to 3. And then we're going to say x is equal to complex. I hope that's the right way to say that. And now we're going to print, the type of x. It's complex. And now we're going to print the value of x. And what it did was it just added plus 0j, which basically that would be the case, because 3 plus 0j, anything times 0 is still 0, so it's still the value of 3. So yes, we can switch to from integers, say, to complex numbers. Now we have x as a complex number. Can we switch it back to, say, a float? Can we change that? We cannot. We cannot change a complex back to a float. Can we change it to an integer? We cannot change it back. So we can go from real numbers to complex numbers, but we can't go backwards. Unfortunately, we can only change strings, or we can change real numbers into a complex number, but we can't go back from complex back to that. It does not allow that particular change, so we have learned something useful. All right, so looking at data types, and now we've looked at casting one data type as another. I will tell you this. There's an important thing that you should know about casting. When you cast a value like we did, like we were using x as a variable name, and we said x was an integer, now x is a boolean, now x is a float, now x is a string or whatever, it actually changes the value of x from one thing to another. The data actually changes. It's not just masking it as something else. The original data value is lost. Remember, we changed from an integer to a float, and then we changed back from a float to an integer, and it just truncated all the decimal points. So the original data value is lost. If you have a float that has value for significant digits, things like that, and you cast that to an integer, the original value, the decimal points, all that stuff is lost, and all you get is the integer value. So when you're writing programs, it's very important. If your program is dependent on, say, significant digits, or it's dependent on something like that, that you keep that in mind. Once again, Python is a loosely typed language. You can stick anything you want to in a variable, but this is where you can get in a mess, because you can put the wrong thing in, or you can cast it because you have to cast it as something else to do an operation, but then you needed the original value somewhere else in your program, and it's gone now. So it's very important that you keep up with what data types you have, and Python does not make that easy. It can be very confusing, so it's important. All right, guys, the assignment is in the text. Go ahead and complete it. Do a screenshot. Turn it in just like you've been doing. If you need help, reach me through the inbox. Contact me there, and I will do everything I can to help you. If you need to, we can even set up a Zoom meeting, or we can come by the office. I'm at 210, room 210 in the library, second floor by the back stairs. So however I can help, I will. Please let me know, and have a good day.